are now checking out
the Win Podcast,
where the everyday people
are the celebrities.
So let's get to know them.
Oh my goodness. It's so funny. I have an exercise with my students. I teach at BMCC. I'm a full-time professor there. I'm assistant professor. And I also adjunct at Manhattan Marymount. And at both schools, I like having an exercise that looks at who are you, especially when I teach my public speaking classes. I have my students do this exercise, and it's really hard. And for a minute, the person, they got to be partners, and one person has to ask you, who are you? Who are you? They can't respond to your answers. You just got to answer it. And even doing that exercise when I do it with my students and I like sample it, it's hard to say who you are. And so there's so much of it. Like, it's hard because who you are encompasses so many things. And so I look at it first from like, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I am an activist, I am an artist, I'm an educator, I am all these little things put together, and I'm fortunate enough that I'm in a field that I can do the things that I love for a living, and I've always had the support of my father. My father was always like, you know, study whatever you want to study, do whatever you want to do, become whatever you want to become, and that has allowed me to sort of create becoming this like educator, artist, in combination of both, and just really enjoy myself while doing these things, and student, because I'm a student of the arts at the same time. Like
I love that, because you touched on like, wow, it's like such a powerful question, because there's so many layers. How do I answer this? And and you are correct, because we're still learning and growing. There's so many things that I can't just say I'm one thing.
Yes.
So it's like, in a sense, like, when I ask this question, I would love to see what people are going to say, because not only are you an actor and a writer, but like you said, look, I'm a sister, right? And those are things that are titles that we should be proud of, because we earned it, and then we're still living through it. So thank you for like sharing that.
Thank you.
You mentioned your dad, and that's something that I want to jump into. Was the art so strong within you where did it start? Like, from young? Was your dad artistic? Was your family like?
It's so crazy. So I do not have a family of artists by any means whatsoever. But my father, I remember when I was younger, my father would play opera, and I'd be like, what the hell is this? This is awful. Now, of course, I love going to the Met, and I like going to the Met at least once a year, and seeing a show there. But it's so funny because they weren't. But I've always loved the arts, and since I was little, and I was telling this to a friend just on Sunday, I was watching the Oscars. My father and I used to watch the Oscars since I was a little kid, and we used to watch movies, always. So I grew up in Spain. I was born in Ecuador. My mom is Peruvian. My dad is Spanish, and so I was less than like 6 months old, and then we moved to Spain. I would spend like summers or Christmases with my grandparents in Peru, and then spend, of course, time with growing up in Spain, and until I came to the States. And so in Spain, there was only, like most Latin American countries back in the 80s, there was only like 2 channels, and that was it. Cable didn't exist, and on Saturdays at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, I can't remember the time, there was always a movie. So my dad and I on Saturdays always watched the movies. And there was always a movie at nighttime, like at 10 o'clock at night, on Saturdays, always. So we always watched these 2 movies. And so I always grew up watching movies with them. We'd go to the movie theater, watch everything. I remember seeing Gremlins, E.T., I remember seeing these Star Wars, all these movies with my father. And we always used to watch the Oscars. And people are always like, I can't believe you watched the Oscars. Boycott the Oscars.
Yeah.
And part of me gets really angry. Yes, I get really angry at the Oscars. But I still watch them because I still think they're important. And the fact that I started doing that as a little girl with my father, like, we never missed an Oscars. And we were in Spain. So they're at 8 o'clock here in the United States, and in Spain that's 6 hours behind. So that was like the only night of the year that I could stay up all night.
Nice.
And we would watch it live, because it was actually, and it was live, and we would always watch it live, and I always thought that was such a special thing. So even today, he went to bed early this time, but usually he still stays up and we'll text to each other. He'll be like, what's up? And be like, are you watching?
Wow.
Yeah, and then he goes to bed because he's getting older.
Yeah.
But And we still talk about it, and we still talk about the movies that have been nominated and the movies that won. And he's like, "What'd you think about this?" I was like, "I am not happy with the Green Book winning." And then we get into this debate as to why not and what don't I like about it, and it's really great.
So
and
you and your dad basically have this connection with movies and the arts, but he wasn't artistic.
No, not at all.
But he loved talking about it
and
with
he still
you,
does.
and
Like,
loved watching movies.
When
as well.
I go back home, that's what he loves. When I go home and visit him, he wants to watch a movie always. And what makes him the happiest is either watch a soccer game and watch Barca because he's a Barca fan, or watch a movie. I'm not a Barca fan, so I will watch a movie with him. And so, like, I was just there in May, and every night we watched a movie. We picked a movie, we watched it.
What was a movie that you can think that connected you guys on a deeper level? Like, maybe there was a movie that you guys was like, maybe like not on a deeper level, but maybe it was like, I'm going to take the next step to maybe emulate that somehow, be an actor or something.
I mean, there's never been a movie for me that inspired me to become an actor. Like, none. I just loved it, and I just loved it. Like, nothing ever run. But it's funny. I never aspired to be like a movie actor by any means. Like, that didn't interest me, though I loved movies. But I was fascinated by acting, and I wanted to know all about it. And so when I was in school in Spain, I did a couple plays, and then when I came to the States, I went to boarding school. I was playing sports. And so usually what happens is in this country, you either have to play sports or you can do the arts. You can't do both. And it still happens. It's very hard to find, and it tears me apart because I see that kids want to do both. They want to play sports and also be in the arts. And coaches are so zealot, I don't think that's the word, and they don't want to share their athletes, and they don't want their athletes to experience other things. And I find that so sad. And I had sort of that experience. I was a 3-sport athlete. I was doing soccer, swimming, and track. And so I couldn't do theater. But what I did was I offered to work backstage to learn how plays were being run. So while rehearsals were going on and certain things were happening, I would be in my practice for whatever sport. And then as soon as my practice would be over, I would run over and help run shows. I would be a runner backstage during the shows and help with the production or help build something.
How fulfilling was that for you? What did you learn during that whole
great.
process about yourself, knowing that, like, I have the sports, but now I'm learning a new love.
It was the only thing, I'll be honest with you, sometimes it saddened me that I couldn't do both. I was like, but it's good that I wasn't, because if you fast forward to today, and I was a high school teacher for many years before coming a college professor, I was able to try to help these students who want to be able to do both. And then in college, like, how do you help kids be able to do both? Because, you should be in high school or in college, you should be able to explore whatever you want. And again, like, sometimes these coaches don't allow that, and they're inhibiting people's dreams of all the things that they can be doing, because you can do more than one thing. You don't have to. You can be good at more than one thing and excel at both those things. And so I'm still an athlete, and not at the collegiate level, but I do triathlons, I do marathons, and it's exciting to know that I still can do that, and I can still do my arts, and kids can do that. So I learned an appreciation of how things work backstage, and I just liked it. And so when I got into college, you can take a freshman appreciation course. And so I signed up for college classes really early. And so I got my first choice, which was an acting class. And as soon as I went to college, freshman year, I was taking an acting class. And first day of classes, they said, "We're doing auditions." And I was like, "Oh, how exciting." And I was like, "I'm going to audition. I've never been in a play. I'm going to audition." But first I was like, "Oh, when are rehearsals?" And rehearsals would start at 6:30. I was a runner, so I would have to go to practice physically from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Then from 6 o'clock to 6:30, you'd have dinner. So if I made it into the play, rehearsals would be from 6:30 to 9:30. So technically, this would be, I could do it. So I auditioned, and I got it. I got a role.
Nice.
And I was like, holy schmolies. And so I literally was doing track, then eating, then going to rehearsals, like my first semester as a freshman in college.
What was some of the things that you experienced, I guess, about yourself, finally making that happen, where people say you can't do these two things, but here you are doing it. It comes with hard work, and commitment and discipline. And what was that feeling for you when you finally started?
It was great to be able to have that choice of both. I eventually chose to stop doing the sports. And it's funny, theater was after that class, theater became my minor, and then it became my major, and now it's become my life. But when I first started, I was like, "Ooh, great! Oh, let's have a theater minor. How exciting! This is so great!" And again, I didn't know that was what my life was going to be. And it's funny, I still talk to my professors at my undergraduate, and now I'm a college professor. We see each other at conferences, and I remember the first time they saw me at a official professorial type scholarship. Conference. They were like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, they literally just came out, and I was like, "I'm a college professor in theater." They were like, "Holy schmoly!" But it's been great. They're like that. They did not expect that. I didn't know that was going to happen either.
Did you feel that the theater, in a sense, got you more open to yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Where, I guess what I want to know is like, what did you learn from the track and field aspect, and now you're doing another journey with the theater? I guess it was more hands-on within you. So what was like the two for you after like saying?
I think what was really easy is that sports teach you a discipline. Like if you want to succeed, you got to go to practice. You got to go to practice.
Right.
Then that's theater. You got to go to practice. You got to go to practice. So you learn this discipline of being in practice and being present. And you have to do the same thing with theater. It's the same as sports. And so that's why they're so related. It's just a different, and you're using your body also, and you're using your voice. It's very, very similar, but just different. And so it's not, so for me, theater was just a moment to become something else, explore something else, and just have fun with that.
And I feel
into different worlds.
Right. And I feel also it touches on a mental aspect as well, because in both journeys, there's probably times there's like, I don't know if I can finish this or I can do this. The doubts and the fears and the insecurities will set in.
Yeah.
But in the end, you find like this courage to keep going through and embrace the unknown and find like, whoa, I just learned so much about myself in this moment.
And it's you have a race that you have to complete or a game that you have to complete, and when you win it, everyone's like, hey. And a play, you have a play that you have to do, and then you finish it and everyone's like, yay. So it's the same type of euphoric feeling once it's done or the conclusion of it. If you do a great performance, you feel fantastic. If you don't, you're and the same thing with the sport. If you don't perform well, you're like heartbroken. And it's the same. And so, but I think that theater gives you an inner exploration that's really, and it's a creative outlet, because sport is not creative. It's physical, and it's mental, and it's very mental, and I love it. For me, it's like a meditation. But theater is a creative outlet, so you can create beautiful things on stage, beautiful moments, memories, thoughts, images, pictures that people take with them for the rest of their life. And that to me is so much more than doing a sport. And I love sports. But to be able to create this moment that maybe someone clicks and relates to it, that is affecting their own personal life, or if when they're seeing themselves reflected on stage for the first time and they've never seen that to me is so beautiful and I think so important.
I agree, and it you by saying those things, it brought me back to you and your dad on watching TV, right, where you guys would have these deep talks about the movies and dissect them. And here you are taking this journey, and you're doing the same exact thing. With you and you though now on stage.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think that's something that you appreciate it so much, because you're creating, but now you're living these different characters, but one of the main characters you're kind of like really digging deep in on the couch is yourself, and the freedom that you expressed and learned from there. So like you, by saying that, I just pictured you and your dad, but then automatically your dad just left and replaced it with like you. So and I saw that.
That's the beauty of acting. In a way, you have to be self-reflective of who you're becoming, who this character is, and you also have to dig deep within yourself.
Right.
And you have to be in a good place to play certain roles, because if you're not, either you can't reach the full potential of that role, or it messes with your mind. And so it's not easy. How
did you transition now after, learning so much as an actor, and you, like you said, you're still a student of it, but what made you now want to direct and then maybe in a sense teach students and give them this wisdom as well? And
so it's so funny. didn't like that I was always sort of cast in sort of these sexualized roles. It made me feel really uncomfortable. And or being the person on stage with the least amount of clothing, and why? Like, there's no reason. I'm a passenger on a bus. Why are you putting me in this ridiculous outfit?
Well, I'm in a bikini.
You know, it's like, and at the time, I wasn't aware of like the stereotypes of like a sexy Latina, like or the eroticization of Latina bodies. Like, what does that mean? Like, I hadn't gotten to that realization, and so I didn't know that. I eventually grew to
it was coming.
Research.
It was like she doesn't know, but wait until she gets deeper into this.
And my research talks about all that stuff too, and like the sexualization of the Latina body and what does that mean, and it still happens all the time. And so it was interesting to be experiencing that and not know it, and feeling uncomfortable, but not having a place to say, because you're an actor, you don't know what you cannot say. I loved acting. I did love acting, but it wasn't there. My senior year, I was offered an audition for a TV show. And I made it, I filmed, sent my film, made it all the way to LA, flew out to LA. I was one of like the top 10 to be cast in the show. And at this time in my life, I was an athlete. I weighed 120 pounds, ripped. I had a six-pack, like arms cut.
You was in the prime Latina. Prime sexy Latina.
Absolutely. I can't even
it was. Wait till she get it.
I look good now.
Yeah, I don't know.
That was like, 20-something
We'll
years
still
ago.
cast you.
Yes. And it was so funny because, like, being there, they kept saying, like, I needed to lose 20 pounds. Like, they're like, we're going to fly you back, but we need you to lose 20 pounds. Yeah. And I was just like, how do I lose 20 pounds in a month? Like, yeah, we're going to give you a month, we'll fly you back. And it made me realize, I was like, man, like, and also, what I didn't share was, I was doing taekwondo. The role needed all this like martial arts, and was doing kickboxing. So I was doing all this stuff, and I was like, how in the world?
Yeah, you was already in top shape.
Yeah, and I was like, there's no way I can lose 20 pounds, because it was all muscle. And I was like, there's no way I could lose this and still keep the athleticism in my body. There's just no possible form or shape. And it just made me realize at that moment in my life, I'm like, is this what I want? Do I want to starve myself to be on TV? Do I want to starve myself to be in the movies? And I said, oh, hell no. I was like, I want to be happy. I want to eat whatever I want to eat and be okay with that. And be okay with my body, whether it is big or whether it's small. Like, yeah, there's no way you're going to dictate how I'm going to physically look and be miserable trying to attain a physical body that Latinas cannot physically attain. I mean, maybe some, but it's not. It's not. We have hips, we have breasts. It doesn't happen. And I mean, it can, but it's hard. And at that time, this is before you even saw like J-Lo. J-Lo hadn't like made it yet, right? So you weren't seeing the sexualization of J-Lo and J-Lo's like body and booty and on the screen yet.
Right.
So I was just like, there's no way. This is not going to happen. And I was like, well, I still want to do this. And at the same time as this was going on, in the summers, I had been teaching. I had started teaching, and I'd flown out to LA, been part of this program where they would bring kids from Venice, and they would bring kids from South Central, and they would bus them into Brentwood, into a private school. So for 6 weeks, the first week you would work with teachers in the field in public schools, and they would teach you curriculums of how do you teach kids. They were middle school kids, and the main emphasis of the program is to give them all these skills, and first have them spend the summer with you so that they weren't being engaged in gang activity.
Gotcha.
And then also giving them an edge up, so when they went back to school, they already knew what was coming in school, and so they would be very stronger. So again, that they wouldn't fall back and then engage in gang activity. And so I participated in that program for 2 years, and I loved it. And so I was really at this moment in my life, senior in college, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I realized I love teaching. I was also very active on my campus. I had lots of companies that were offering me, and this is the boom of like the World Wide Web. But I had companies offering me like public relations positions for 6 figures, and I was like, I'm gonna go into teaching. I'm not gonna do this. And I was like, what am I thinking? But I also, in the back of my mind, I was like, well, maybe this could be the ideal dream. I could get hired at high school, and I could start a drama program, and I can teach drama at a high school, and like create this for kids.
Right.
And that's exactly what I ended up doing. Like after I graduated, I ended up moving to Miami. I was in a school, got hired as a history teacher because that was one of my majors. And I started a drama program that was sort of non-existent.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty awesome and amazing. And one, I just want to say I'm so glad that you had that realization early on.
Yes.
When that was presented in front of you and automatically checked in with yourself is, you know what, this is not what I want to do.
Yeah.
This is I would like to have that moment on screen, but there's so much I have to sacrifice that's not worth it.
No.
And I think there's a lot of people that don't practice the integrity or don't even check in with themselves, and they just see the moment, and they go after it not knowing what they're sacrificing, which is a piece of themselves in the end. And I think at the end of the day, that's more having that bond and honesty with yourself goes a longer way than the money and all that stuff.
And I tell my students today, I was like, a working actor is a successful actor. Just because you don't know who they are and you don't know their name does not mean that they're not successful.
Right.
I was like, if they're always working and they're always getting booked, they're a successul actor.
Right.
I'm like, yes, maybe they're not making millions. Maybe they don't have a mansion in Beverly Hills. But that doesn't equate success.
What are some tools you teach? You shared one of them, but once you get a whole group of new students, what are some tools you focus on early on to mold them?
Discipline. If you want to succeed, you've got to have discipline. And so many students come into the field of acting wanting this immediate success, and they think it's easy and it's going to be right away, and it's like, it's not going to be right away. I love showing a video of Morgan Freeman talking about it. It took him until he was 50 to get his big break. And people are like, ooh. Chad Boswick, it took him until he was 30. I have friends of mine that are still waiting for their big breaks, and they're working and hustling it, and they are working and working and working. And they're incredible. Sometimes you can go through a dry spell. You can be on Broadway. Just because you're on Broadway once doesn't mean you're going to be on Broadway again. It's not an automatic.
It is. I feel that we put so much pressure of what is this break is supposed to be for us.
Yeah.
Like the break is being on Broadway. The break is getting all these bookings and these movie roles and getting paid so much. But what if the break is as simple as you doing it? What if you actually being on stage and performing? I think sometimes, even myself, you have to check in and tell yourself that, if you're working, creating plays, or you're writing, you are a success. You're making that happen, because there's other people, whether they have either a mental capability or physical or whatever it is, are not allowed the opportunity to perform, or kids or different countries. Their big break is something as simple as I want to come to America, or I just want to perform, or I wish I had a voice to use instead of the sign language, which is also a voice. But you know what I mean? Like, I wish I can do something vocally. Yeah. But I think in society we put so much pressure on this thing of the break, and when you get deeper into that too as an artist, you quickly you lose sight of what is the main purpose of all this, and it comes down to you having fun and the love for it and the learning process.
And it's hard. Like, one of the things I teach, especially my female identifying students, one of the things I tell them is you need to think about your choices. I tell all my students, but especially women, and I give one example. I had a young girl call me up and say, former student of mine say, Secret, I got cast in this NYU film student production, but they want me to take my top off, and I don't feel comfortable. And I was like, why don't you feel comfortable? And she explained why. And I was like, well, is it in the script? Does the script dictate that your character's choice is to not have a top on? No. Oh, okay. So who's telling you have to take your top off? The director. And I was like, but it's not in the script. No. I'm like, so that is a director's choice. That is not a character choice. That choice is not embedded in what's been written. And I mean, someone could write it in the script. I mean, the writer could just come in and be like, takes top off. Yeah. Whatever. But what is the impetus? Why is this woman walking around without a top? I often think about that one scene with Halle Berry in like Monsters, where I don't know why she has a top off. She's like reading a magazine, and I'm like, why does she have a top? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And like, I don't hang out in my house like that. That's just not. But again, This, again, sexualization of female bodies. And there's nothing wrong if that is the character. There's nothing wrong. So going back to the student, I was like, well, if you don't feel comfortable and it's not a character choice and it's not in the script, you have your answer, and your answer is no. And so turn down that role. Plus, you're not getting paid as a student film.
Right.
And I said, because at the end of the day, that role is going to always be there. It's going to be filmed, and people can always go back and see that. And that's going to always be out there. And so I tell that to my students, the choices that you make. Denzel Washington has a great video I love to share with my students where he talks about that, where he was offered this role that was just ridiculous, and he chose not to take it. And by choosing not to take it, he was able to do another play. I think he was able to get cast in, I think it was Glory or Cry of Freedom, which got him an Oscar nomination. And so these choices of, it's hard, like, do you take the gangster role? Do you take the drug addict role because it pays the rent? Or do you not take those roles out of integrity, which we were discussing earlier?
Are these things that your father or your parents or your family
I think my grandmother
taught you?
I think my grandmother.
Right.
I would say my grandma. Because when I came to the States, I moved in with my grandmother. And my grandmother has always been a social activist. And she was a diehard feminist. And so growing up with this woman who's like a feminist and believes in women's rights has always put that in the forefront of everything.
It definitely helped that they installed these lessons from early on.
That had to have been her. Yeah, absolutely. My father's very open, and one of the reasons my father wanted me to come to this country is because he wanted me to have more opportunities as a woman, because he saw that if I stayed in Spain, I wouldn't have the same equal opportunities as if I came to this country. And that might sound crazy, but Spain's still a very chauvinistic country, and I love Spain, but it is.
What's crazy to me is that, you having this parent is like, go for it, live your dreams, because the typical Hispanic household is like, you need an office job, blah 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 blah. But your dad is like, it's cool, get the money to like survive, but be yourself, learn,
and
create.
that must have come from my grandmother, his mom. It had to, because again, she was doing social work here in New York. Like, she divorced my grandfather and moved to New York to do social work and worked for the UN and traveled to Morocco and worked with women and taught them how to farm hybrid corn, and she was involved with the civil rights movement, like all of these things that she's always been really passionate about, and always about the enhancing of other people's lives, the enhancing of women's lives, the equality of women. She always fought for these things. So I think that when my father had me, a daughter, not a son, he spread the same kind of ideologies that my grandmother taught him.
When you look back on all the plays you directed, even played a character in, and all the students that you taught and made friendships with, when you take a second just to look back on all of that, what comes to your mind? Like, what do you see?
So much for me. It's the friendships. I just been traveling, and I got to see one of my former students last week, and it was beautiful. And then we realized we hadn't seen each other in like 2 years. And I taught her, she's 30 something, and I taught her when she was like 15, 14. Wow. I have another former student of mine who's teaching. I hired her at my university. She's a college professor at my university. And I taught her when she was 14, and I met her when she was a freshman in high school. I was her high school teacher. But I think the beauty out of everything is the connections. When you do theater, you develop these connections with people. When I was teaching in the high school, my students were spending 6, 7, 8 hours with me a day. They were spending more time with me and with our drama troupe than they were with their own parents. And that was just what it is. We were so committed in the productions that we were doing and the work of building this drama program. And it was incredible because we went from 0 to winning districts, to winning states, to representing the state of Florida at like this huge conference. And it's incredible because when we first started, the students were like, remember going to our first conference and we were looking at these productions of these high schools that had all this money and they had all these costumes and elaborate sets, and my students be like, we're never going to win. Fast forward 3 years later, we end up winning with like 2, crates and jumpsuits and ribbons, and we win and take everything. And everyone's like, what's this where did this school come from? And the talent was always there. There just needed to be someone to direct that talent. And so to be able to still have, and then to see those students then become adults and have their own choices, and then become a friend / mentor to them is the most beautiful thing in the world. To see them succeed, to see them continue the path of theater or the arts if they choose to go that way, or not, or choose to do something else. I had a student who was going to med school, and he took my classes senior year of high school, and then he decided to switch majors to theater.
He was like, yes.
Yes. And his parents were like, ah! And he's a playwright now, and
Wow.
he just had some productions he just had his production up in Chicago like last week.
I think it's so beautiful because this world that was shown to you early on, right? And then you went out into that world and show at times how they try to put you in a box or something, but you was like, no, this goes against what I believe in and what was taught from the beginning. So you have this world of choices, freedom, getting to know who you are, what you are, explore yourself. Don't limit yourself. It's okay if you want to leave something or try something. It's beautiful to see that you take that and you pass that on.
Yeah.
And what you do, whether it's the writing and the students, and then whether you want to admit it or not, if you made a change, because there's some people's like, I don't want to, I'm just doing my job, right? Whether you want to admit that or not, the work speaks for itself. When you have these students that come up to you and you just see some of the work in the world that you installed in them and what they did with that to take it on. And I think that's so fascinating and amazing.
That's the most beautiful thing, because then you're spreading the love, and it's the love for theater, and it's the love. Like, I teach an intro to theater class. Most of my students have never seen a play. They walk out of that class with an appreciation for theater that they never had coming in, and for an appreciation to becoming theater goers. So now they're contributing to the arts, and who knows what they'll do with that? Who knows? Like, how that can, and that to me is what makes it all worth it.
What advice would you give to others, whether they want to become a professor or an artist, or maybe leave a difficult job that they're not happy in? What is something you would tell that person who's listening right now and probably stuck right there, but they know this is not where they want to be at, they want to go on?
You got to let it go. You got to let it go and follow your dreams. I know it sounds cliche, but you have to let it go and follow your dreams. If you are unhappy, you will always be unhappy. And if you have the power of change. You have the power to make a difference. You really do. And if you choose to stay in a job, you're choosing to stay in that job. You can find every excuse in the book why that you can't get out of that job. Those are all excuses. Make it happen. Do it. Take that risk. Yeah, it's going to suck if you are financially unstable, X, Y, and Z. Come up with a plan. You can't just make a decision. I tell people that. Come up with a plan. It might not happen immediately, but you can't give up. You got to keep trying. Again, at the Oscars, Lady Gaga said, she's like, it's not about how many times, they tear you down. It's about how many times you get up. And you keep going towards that goal no matter what anyone says. So if you're unhappy, let it go. Walk away. Before you do that, create a plan. You're unhappy, start making a plan. What are the choices that you're going to make so that you can walk away and still be able to pay your bills?
Yep.
What choices are you going to make? Don't say you're unhappy at a job and not apply for other jobs. If you're unhappy, start applying for other jobs.
Yep.
Start putting yourself out there. If you're you've got to come up with a plan. So that, because if you sit there and you say I'm unhappy, and you don't do anything, you've got to put a plan into action.
Yeah, take responsibility.
Exactly. Let it go. First come up with a plan. Realize that this is not making you happy. Come up with a plan, put that plan into action, and then get out of there.
And it goes right back to one of the first lessons you teach, discipline.
Yeah.
Because people think they're going to get it right off the back, but no.
No.
People always see like either the final result, but they don't see the work that goes into it. So you have to stay motivated and find those things, whether if it's a movie or a quote, whatever it is, to refuel that discipline again, because it's a long race. You can't sprint it.
And we have life, and life interferes in every single form of matter. Sometimes one of our parents gets sick. Sometimes your significant other, love of your life, leaves you. Sometimes someone passes away.
Yep.
Sometimes you suffer some economic, trauma. Sometimes your house burns down. Like, who knows? Like, stuff happens to people all the time. Life happens, and it's going to affect you, and it's going to slow down your process and your goal. But you got to keep going after it. You got to have that plan, stick to it, and keep going for it. And you got to just own it and be like, I'm going to let go of this and keep moving forward and go after what you want. People look at me and like, oh, you've achieved all of this and this and that. It's not easy. It has never been a day that's been easy. I've never been able just to walk in and be like, yeah, I got this. No, I had to work so hard for all the things that I have. And going back to what you were saying, people don't see that. They just see the result. They don't care to see how hard it was to get there. They're like, oh my God, you're so happy. Oh my God, you get to do all of this. Oh, you get to do all of that. You live such an incredible life. I've worked really hard to be at that place. It does not come easy. And I'm still working. Because even when you achieve your goal, you got to keep working at your goal. Because once you become stagnant, there's no moving. Like you've got to keep going in a direction. Find a new goal. Find a new passion and keep making it happen. Keep pursuing it. Keep making these plans. Keep putting them into action.
Oh, thank you. I agree with you 1,000,000%. It's so true.
Yeah.
So, Daphne, we got to know you now. Thank you for so much to sharing so much about yourself and how your upbringing and the whole journey. Basically, you summed it up beautifully, and I got to know you even more. And it's been a blessing to hear you speak, honestly. So now we're going to go to the first segment of our interview. We're going to run along now. And this one is called Let's Look Inside. That's segment number 1. Now, the first question for that segment is there a meaning to life? If so, what is it to you? Now, when people, usually when I say that, they're probably like, oh, I need to bring out the chalkboard and have this long. No, it could be something so simple. So I just love to take that moment to see what comes out of the people's mind in that moment. If they really just take a moment, like, is there really a meaning to life? And if so, what is it to you?
To live it. To live it. The purpose of life is to live it. If you're stuck working on a 9 to 5 in a cubicle and you're miserable in your relationship, you're not living life. If you've never traveled the world, you're not living life. Or even traveled outside of your city. You're not living life. And I know that economic means is hard, so I can't impose traveling around the world for people, but I always recommend it.
No, but there's always a solution for that, right? Because whether, like, I never been to Philadelphia, but I took a megabus for like $5. And I was like, I never been there. It's like an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
Let me go there.
Yeah.
Did it. The same thing I did for
I love that.
Boston.
Yeah.
I was like, what's in Boston? I like baseball. Let me try to catch a baseball game.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And it's on a budget.
Yes.
Megabus again.
Yes.
$10 for the win.
Yes.
I did a day trip.
Yes.
Started early in the morning and came back at like 10 at night.
Yes.
So I made that happen. So they can't even use that as an excuse. They're like, oh, I don't have $20 will get you to Boston in a megabus.
Yes. And you can walk around for free and see everything and meet people and then
Exactly.
Yes, I could not agree more. And I used to travel a lot when I was younger, and then life, economics, and I sort of stopped traveling. And then when I started running again, I realized I was like, ooh, how can I combine travel with run? I was like, runcations. And so I have this goal of running either a half marathon or a full marathon in every state in the United States. And for the cost of some of the races here in New York, like the New York City Marathon's like $300. So for like the cost of running the New York City Marathon, I can literally travel to another state, stay there, run there, and discover a new city. And it's wonderful. I love that. But life, you have to live it. And my father taught me that. My father taught me that if I have rarely any money, to spend it on good food. He's like, if you have $5, spend it on some really good food. He's like, because that'll be worth more than anything else. And it's funny because then you're like, well, what am I gonna do afterwards? But there's always an afterwards. You can always find a solution. Kind of going back to what you were saying, and you have to live life. That's the purpose. Like, and I've always had the philosophy that the day you stop learning, like the day you stop experiencing, is the day you die. And so you could be dead way before you physically die. And so if you're living life and you're living the moment and you are taking everything that's happening at once, that's going to make it so worth it. And that gives you life. Like, that gives you vibrance. And that to me is so much better.
That's awesome. The second question for Let's Look Inside is, if you can teach everyone one concept, what concept would have the biggest positive impact on humanity?
Compassion.
Nailed it. Love it.
Absolutely.
That's great. Moving on. Segment number 2 is which is everyone knows this segment is one of my favorites. Words from my spiritual teacher, Guru Enlightenment. She teaches me spirituality and a lot about myself and the tools that I have to become anything that I want and break free from society. She teaches many lessons and workshops all for free. And you guys, all the information will be in the description. And by now, you probably checked her out, and you should, and reach out to her, get that session. This is a writing from her book, and it's called Facing. And it goes, "We are all afraid of the unknown, and we all hide from it, not knowing that no matter what we do or how much we hide, it will always be right there facing us. Let go of the fear so we can have a chance to enjoy our destiny. Let's not waste too much time. Time is very limited." How do you feel hearing that?
It's truth. Truth. Fear cripples us in a way that, and as a teacher, I'm seeing so many of my students, this generations that are coming into schools, they are suffering a tremendous amount of anxiety and fear that I've in record highs that I've never seen before. And it saddens me. They're so used to like the right or wrong answers. They're so used to what's being done right and what's being done wrong. They have a hard time understanding what's subjective. How do I, and there's so much fear. There's so much fear of not being perfect. And there's so much fear of not succeeding. And it's like, whoa. When a student walks in the room and they're living that, it's so hard to sort of like tear down those walls and be like, it's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have flaws. Like, that's beautiful. That makes you who you are. Mistakes allow you to learn. You can't be perfect all the time. Otherwise, you won't learn. You won't grow. And fear is really, I think, crept up in everyone's lives. Fear of the unknown, fear of what's coming next, fear of like, oh, well, what if this happens? Like, again, if you're chasing your dream, right? And you're unhappy at your job, going back to what we were saying. Well, what if I quit, then I'm not going to have a job. How am I going to pay my work? Then that's fear, that's crippling. So combat the fear, face it, and that's why I always say make a plan so that you can smack fear in the behind and keep moving forward.
It's funny because you absolutely hit it right on the nose. But when I was reading this, it took me back to your life, right back to you and your dad watching TV, right? And, you having this world that they brought to you that you could be anything that you want. Of course, you had the fears and doubts now that you're going to leave Spain. But you allowed yourself to see what that unknown would be for you. Yeah. And through your trials and tribulations and your lessons, you saw at least you experienced so much of these destinies that was waiting for you. You could have easily stood in Spain. You could have easily gave in once you came over here to that role.
Yeah.
But you kept on pushing and pushing and pushing to do the things that you felt was right for you and what you wanted to do. To me, this kind of like wraps up the whole journey of what you expressed today. And you didn't, in a sense, maybe waste time. Maybe there was moments there that anyone has a pothole and they take a break, but you found a way to continue on and not stay there for too long or so. Like, you are so living what you just said, live life.
And it's so hard. 11 years ago, I was in Miami. 12 years ago, I was in Miami, and I said, I want more. And so I was like, let me apply for a PhD program. I got in. It took me 10 years to finish a PhD, but I did it. And interesting, like I said, what do I want? This is like 12 years ago. And I said, I was 30. I was like, what do I want? I want to be directing plays in New York City. I want to be directing plays at the college level. And I want to have my PhD. Those are 3 things I want. Took 10 years.
Right.
But I got those 3 things. And so, again, now in my life, I'm sitting down like, what do I want? And I've made a list. And I'm going after the things I want. And you have to do that. You have to go after the things you want.
And I think to the top on that, like, one thing that my spiritual teacher taught me, she says, because it's great to have that list, and we all do it. And one thing we need to be realistic ourselves. It kind of like you touched on it.
Yeah.
It took me 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Things will happen when they are meant
Yes.
to happen,
Yes.
not when we want them to happen.
Oh my goodness,
And
yes.
she taught me that, and it is so true. It's fine to do the list, go after it,
Yep.
but don't put this amount of time when you think you should have it done, because then you're kind of like setting yourself for failure, because if you don't achieve it within that time frame, that doesn't mean you failed. You're still
Yes.
going at it.
My goodness, yes,
And when it finally breaks,
Yeah.
it's worthwhile. And you look back like what you just did. Hey, it took me fucking 10 years, but hey, I did it.
And I did not expect it to take me that long by any means. Like when I first started that program, I did not think it was going to take.
But
that
like
long.
how scary it would have been. It's
You
like,
know?
I want these 3 things and 10 years. You're like what? You would freak out. You know, no one does that.
And you also don't know what order those things are going to come in. They
Yes.
did not come in the order I thought.
Exactly.
I thought I would get the PhD first, then I would get the job at
Right.
a college, then, I'd be directing. I actually started directing first in New York City professionally. Then I got a job full time when I even hadn't finished the PhD. Then I finished the PhD. So even how I thought it was going to go, it didn't go, but I got all of it.
Yep.
And so again, but you can't give up, and you have to put it into action. You have to, but you're so right. You never really know when it's going to go. And when you put that, again, this like restriction on, it doesn't help you. And it's a barrier. And then you're like, well, let's say at year 9, I could have given up at year 9 and been
Yep.
like, it's been 9 years and I haven't finished this. I don't think I'm going to finish it. Let me just not finish it. No, man, no. Like, you can't. And that's hard. It's hard in the arts. It's really hard in the arts. It's hard when you want to be an actor that makes it. Again, going back to full circle to our conversation. Because, again, you need to figure out what's the definition of making it.
Yep.
What's your definition of, and like, you can't put a time. And again, it goes back to like Morgan Freeman being like, he was 50. And going back to some of these actors, and they're in their 50s before they've gotten X, Y, and Z. And so again, like, but not giving up. And if you love it, then you've got to go for it. There's too many unhappy people in this world. Too many. And there's so much suffering. And it's fine to suffer. And it's okay to cry. But as you're suffering and crying, walk through it. Like, acknowledge it and walk through it, and just keep going towards that direction.
Thank you for checking out the episode. Please help us out by subscribing to our podcast, writing a review, sharing with a friend, or leaving a comment. Thank you. This will help us so much.